Hey everyone. Um, Today we are going to go over some advocacy training. So, all week I haven't really slept, but last night, a lot of us were up till 4 in the morning answering questions that everyone had, what some next steps are, how to properly do advocacy work. So, what we're doing is issuing a public training that we from when we were doing the Find Vanessa Guillen early on, we have a training deck that we made publicly available. So today I'm gonna just give a public training so that everyone can use this training where they need to. Before getting into that, I just want to go over some of the questions that you guys had. The public training you can share. You can share that with other organizations. You can share that in other communities. It's fine. I know that we're very protective of the brand, and you can share this because it's our branding. What I want to make clear, where I think there's a gray line for some people, is that when certain people are using materials from our brands, the reason that we're so protective over it is because we are the most progressive in the MST space. And honestly, we might even be the most progressive in the veteran space as an organization. And that is also why we attract very diverse individuals, right? And what happens is majority of a lot of these advocacy groups are not progressive and they don't hold the same belief systems. So in terms of all of us doing advocacy work, I'm on board with that. In terms of, them, sharing content to help advance the cause, totally supportive of that. What I don't want, and what I know all of our senior volunteers at MSTM do not want our brand mixed with other brands who don't align with us. And I will give you an example is when it comes to how we run the organization and our values, we practice what's called quantum activism, which is scientific spirituality, which is not the same as religion. So what happens is the way we look at it is religion's a personal walk for everyone, right? And your personal journey to your soul's healing and your development to get closer to God is your personal journey. So we don't mix our politics at all with religion. So that is one of the reasons that we're very inclusive and very diverse. And what happens with that is we attract a lot of individuals from different backgrounds, different religions, different storylines, different communities like the LGBTQIA community, transgender individuals, because um, we don't have this narrow box, right? So what I want to just make clear is, you can share our content and you can use our content with other organizations, especially if they don't have the resources to do a training. That is okay. We just don't want mixing with our brand with other brands that do not believe what we believe, because we we have certain values that we uphold and things that we believe in, and we don't want people to get confused and think that we're agreeing with certain other organizations' ideologies when we're not. So that's just what I want to clear up. In terms of the public training, feel free to, share this content if you need it or use it for what you're doing advocacy wise. That's totally okay. Um, so what we're going to do today is go over advocacy training. And the advocacy training that we're going to go over is how to phone bank, and what phone banking is, how to phone bank, some of the best practices that you need to be effective. And that's really where we are looking to drive results, because a lot of times people take advocacy actions and they don't even know why they're taking it. So that is really what I want to keep in mind for everyone. when we're doing this work, right, is I want you to keep in mind that being effective is what drives results. So today's advocacy training is going to be about teaching you how to be effective in getting the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act passed. So we're going to use an old training for today that I'm going to pull up. Oh, thank you. That was very sweet. Good morning. In New York, it's almost afternoon though. Let me just pull this up. I mean, I'm glad to see that you're up this early in the morning, right? Or in New York, I should be like, I've had half a day almost, but no, I actually went to bed at like 4. And I did wake up at 10 if that counts. I am a little bit tired, but I had some tea this morning, so hopefully I'll make it through today. But like the whole week has been like that. So I'm definitely a little bit exhausted for sure. This going so we can get the training up. Okay. Let me just make sure everyone can see it. Okay, so this training deck was from months ago when we were doing the Find Vanessa Guillen phone banking session. A lot of the principles are still the same. So that's why, we didn't go forward with making a new deck. And it was just more feasible to use this deck because a lot of you have seen it before. And on top of that, we can use a lot of these same principles. So what we're going to get into, well, this goes back to what we're saying. Values are our bedrock, right? We are a team first and a company second. So this was just it when we were doing the initial phone banking training. Vanessa was missing at the time. We didn't know what had happened to her. So this was pretty early on. This was when she went missing from Fort Hood, Texas. And this was, just an introduction to what our phone banking section was going to look like. This just talks about what we do and who we are because we were giving the training to a lot of people who were not part of the movement at the time. So I'll just read this because there's also a lot of new people. So at MSTM, we advocate, create awareness, and lobby elected officials to enact legislation that protects survivors of military sexual trauma. Phone banking is one of the many activities that we do to get results from elected officials. And sometimes volunteers don't know all the steps to achieve success, and that's okay. We're here to help you every step of the way. While we don't know the outcome of our efforts and what they will be, there's one thing that we can count on. And that is that we are a part of creating much needed change that is on the horizon. So steps to advocate for Vanessa Guillen, being the voice of the voiceless. So this is generally, this is like my favorite slide, by the way. So internal motivation, the reason why it's really important is think about why you're doing this and connect to the cause. A lot of people will take an action, like make a phone call or email their elected officials, but don't ever take the time to do what's called introspection. Introspection is really important for those of you who are in therapy. That is what you do with your therapist when they help you bring to light some of your behaviors and the reasons that you take certain actions, right? Good and bad. And what happens with introspection in this case, you want to connect to the cause authentically. And I will give you an example for me. When our artist, the movement's artist, reached out to me because she lived in Houston, Texas, and Vanessa Guillen's story was still really local, we started literally a massive social media campaign of just pushing these local stories. And the reason that happened is, her and I are both Hispanic, and her and I connected really well on the culture, and like that transcended into like literally magnificence when we started working together. And her story also related so much to me, our artist, because her son passed away of sepsis, and in December I almost died from sepsis. So like her and I connected on cultural background and upbringing. adversities and struggles. The reason I started MSTM was the same reason she started her art company. So it was like a match made in heaven. And when she brought this to me, she was like, hey, this is on the local news where I live. She was like, I think you guys might be able to help. And she was like, it would be really important to me if you can help with awareness. So when she sent me the story, she told me background before she sent it to me. And when she told me that story and I read it, and then I saw Gloria Guillen on the news and I started learning about it, I got super connected to Vanessa Guillen's story. You know, I am Hispanic. You know, there's certain obstacles that I've had in my upbringing because of my background. And what ended up happening was that hearing her story and hearing her mom talk about what she went through, and this was at this time where we were looking for Vanessa, I got so connected to it because I'm like, oh my God, I went through this and I went UA and I didn't tell anyone because I was fearing for my life. And, you know, between the cultural upbringing, the story, her age, where I was, like, so many dots were connecting. On top of the fact that I had this really strong connection with our movement's artist. So the internal motivation for me, it was igniting that fire to pursue justice. And also it was like seeing myself go through this again 12 years later. And at that time, like, we already started MSTM. So it was like I was angry. That was part of my motivation of like, why is this still happening and why aren't people taking it seriously? And how much more do we have to fight? Like, we had been to Congress already, we had been to DC, we had been in the news, in the radio. Like, it was like we had been doing so much to create awareness. So the fact that Vanessa was missing and it was due to military sexual trauma, it was both painful and it was angering to me that no one in power was doing anything about it. So anger and pain, and empathy, right? Connecting to the story, those three emotions were really my internal motivation to be like, okay, it's time to take action. We have a platform, let's do something. So each one of us has internal motivation, right? But it might be a different set of feelings. It might be the same feelings that I mentioned, but knowing your internal motivation is important because that is your North Star to help you guide for success and help you know that you're doing the right thing. And you always want to take actions that align with the highest good and that feel good to you personally. Because we're all different, our emotional and mental templates are different. So your internal motivation could be totally different than other people's, but knowing where that's coming from and assuring yourself that it's coming from a good and healthy place puts you in a mindset and an emotional space that is healthy. Then you want to find a quiet space because you don't want to do advocacy work when there's a lot of distractions or when there is also, you know, there's chaos going on. You're trying to do something, you know, there's too much going on. So you need silence, and you really want to come with advocacy work from a place of calm. Protesting, all those emotions, anger, empathy, frustration, like, it's balls to the wall, right? Like, you can express those emotions, but when you're doing advocacy work, you got to come from a more stable place of calculation, if that makes sense, because you're doing, you know, if you're going to your elected official and like you're screaming at them because of your emotions, that might not get you as far, right? So, and it's okay to show your emotions, but like, you'll probably be more dramatic and expressive with your emotions at a protest, and you're going to be in lobbying because you need to have a conversation to move it forward. But having a quiet space will help you to be effective. And I feel like a lot of people discount that. Like, they just don't consider that at all. They're like, their TV's on, their husband's doing work right next to them, their kids are running around, and the quiet space creates a distraction where you can't communicate effectively. And if you can't communicate effectively, you're not driving results. Now, the other thing that's really important is you want to plan your phone calls and follow up. There's a reason those two are together. So when you're planning out your phone calls, so for instance, what we're doing right now is getting Republicans to co-sponsor the bill that's in the House, right? So when you're doing your phone calls to your representatives and you're also working on follow-up, they're paired together. And not only are they paired together, you want to plan your call in advance. So this goes back to internal motivation and a quiet space. Why are you doing this? How are you connected to the cause? You're calling your elected official. What is the action you would like them to take? Why is this important to you? Why is this important for the highest good? Why is this important for the next generation of young people? And do an outline, write a little plan down. It does not need to be like 5 pages. You know, you don't need, in this case, you don't need to tell your whole story. If you want to tell your story, save that for perspectives. In this case, when you're taking a lobbying action, an advocacy action, you want to keep it, your talking points, to what I would call an elevator pitch, because I think most of you have heard that. I personally don't like the name of it, but it makes sense, right? You're in an elevator for 30 seconds to a minute. So when you're talking and you're trying to drive results, keep it short, simple, to the point, but keep in mind what you have to say, right? And then when you are making that connection and that phone call with your representative's office, then you want to get, because remember, you have to do a follow-up. You want to get the email address, the name, and the phone number of your representative's veterans advocate or their military advocate. Some reps have a military advocate, some have a veterans advocate, some have like one that's synonymous, some have both. It's how they do their office structures and their budgets is all up to them. But you want someone that's in that realm. And then what you're going to do is you're going to gather their emails for follow-up. Always have a pen and paper or have your computer up to be taking notes while you're making these phone calls. If you do not take notes down, if you do not write things down, if you do not do follow-ups, you did nothing. Your advocacy efforts were a waste of time at this point. So make sure that you are documenting everything that you're doing for your advocacy efforts, because when you're gathering the emails, you follow up in writing. 100% of the time, you follow up in writing. I'm going to say that again. Whenever you're doing advocacy work and you make a connection and you get information, you are going to follow up in writing. That is the most important rule to doing advocacy work. I know it seems simple, but I guarantee you, if I didn't say that, probably over 90% of you would not do that. So we're going to say it one more time. The most important thing you can do in the advocacy process, the most important step you can take is follow up in writing. Now, the reason for that is if it's not documented, it did not happen. So if you call your rep and you're asking them to take a position on something and you do not follow up in writing, they're not taking the action. I'm going to say that again. They're not taking the action. Why? Because your phone call didn't happen. Or your phone call happened and nobody really knows it happened. It got lost somewhere, no one's taking care of it, so you follow up in writing, right? There's a date, there's a time. So 100% of the time, once you make the initial connection and you get the information, from that point on, do everything in writing until you either score a meeting or you get the desired results. Now, I'm going to say it one more time. That's the most important step you could take. Now, you're going to discuss the actions that you want them to take. In this case, the action that we want is we want Republicans in the House to sign on to the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act of 2020. And in order to have that happen, we need constituent veterans who've gone through MST in those spaces or in the adjacent areas. So you might live in a district that's right next to another one and a rep hasn't signed on. We did send out the list in email, so you guys have it. If anyone's missing it, just let me know. So I mentioned this in the last slide, so I will not spend too much time on this, but Use your personal story to introduce and explain why it's important for elected officials to take action. And that goes back to introspection as well as what your internal motivation is. In this case, though, you don't need to write a 5-paragraph aspect of it. I'm a survivor of military sexual trauma. I'm a veteran who was in the U.S. Navy. I'm a local constituent. The I Am Vanessa Guillen Act is really important to me about moving this conversation forward. I volunteer for the military sexual trauma movement. I understand that these policies are beneficial and really could help the next generation of young people. Will you co-sponsor this? It would mean a lot to me. And like, you keep it simple. Connecting with your veterans advocates. This I explained to you on the last, also on the last slides. Get their name, get their contact information, jot down their email, their phone numbers, and their names. Best practice is as soon as you get off the phone with them, send an email expressing your concerns. In this case, your desire to speak with your representative, just do the ask, right? Because we have a specific ask at this point. So express your concerns about what you've gone through in your experience, what happened to Vanessa, and at this point, you need them to co-sponsor this bill. And that's what you want to see from your rep. For follow-up, you want to keep follow-ups going on with your elected official. And also like family members, close relatives. Hey, I'm giving a training right now and I'm on Facebook Live, so I have to call you back. All right. Love you. Bye. Sorry. Sorry about that, you guys. All right. So anyway, we have to work on the follow-up. Sometimes your veterans advocate's not going to get back to you for a while. So keep following up. Like, even if they don't answer, just keep following up in writing. And if you do a phone call, pair it with an email. Always pair in writing, your actions in writing. So like if I get the initial contact, I send an email, I don't hear from my rep in the next 3 days, send another email and you can make the phone call. But just don't do phone calls without something written. Pair them together. Being results oriented also means that you have to be flexible and adaptable to your elected officials' desire to help. Sometimes they won't give you what you want or what you expect, but they'll offer a different solution and you'll need to be educated on how to navigate their responses. So sometimes your elected official is not going to want to sign on to something for a certain reason. And hopefully they express that to you honestly. And then you'll have to learn how to navigate the conversation to still drive results. That could be a whole training in and of itself. So I'm not going to go over that today. But for the most part, we're taking some very simple actions right now. One of the most common ways that your elected officials will say they won't sign on to something is they'll tell you they're not educated in this area. So for those of you who don't want to spend hours and hours, because your elected officials are not going to give you hours and hours, you can shoot them an email with the link to mstmovement.org/publications. And when you send them that email, all the fact sheets are there, the storylines, the outcomes. So what will happen at that point is you can send an email if they give you a response that they're not educated in this matter. You can, this will give you the statistics, what happens at that. Some elected officials will be like, well, Vanessa Guillen is a one-off case. And you're going to have people that do that. Like, it's super unfortunate, but it will happen. In that case, your response or your counter to that is like, actually, this is highly prevalent in the military. The statistics around suicide, homelessness, substance abuse are all the most prevalent in those who've experienced military sexual trauma, more so than those who go to combat. I'd like to further educate you on that. Can I send you this link with some publications that can help you make an educated decision? I would love to see you sign on to this. And then follow-up, and then it says follow-up email. So there's a lot of follow-up involved, and follow-up is just as important as doing anything else. If you're struggling with how to follow up, how to put an email together, you can always email at support@mstmovement.org. We can assist you with email templates. We can assist you with facilitating conversations. A lot of you were doing that last night. So that's pretty much where we're at with that. And that's the remainder of this phone bank. And let me just get back. All right. So that is the overall training in the process for how to do advocacy and be able to get the Republicans in the House to sign on. We did send an email last night. Again, you can forward that once you get their contact information. Time involve more work depending on your rep. So that definitely happens. Yeah, it's morning time there for sure. Is it more or less informal just to attach a link to your personal MST story if you've already come out with it? I mean, you can do that. Like, there's no harm in doing that. Especially if you've already told your story and there is something public. The only thing I will say about it is sometimes when you give your elected officials more to read and you need just an action. So think about, there's a time and a place for everything, right? And when you're in a lobbying meeting and they give you an hour and you're in the middle of a face-to-face meeting and they're giving you time, they want to hear your story, right? And essentially, when you're setting one of those meetings and they're giving you an hour or 30 minutes or whatever they're willing to give you, that's where you want to present like your story. If they're not engaging with you in that capacity, one of the things that I really want to point out is that if they're not having that conversation with you and they're not really responsive, sometimes when you're giving them more work than what's needed, your story, your email, and your communication is going to go into the trash bin. And I know that that sounds harsh, and I don't think that that's right. I just want to say that from like my moral compass. However, that's how some of these people will think, because the reality with politics in general is elected officials sit on various committees. And depending on the committee that they depending on the committee that they sit on, that's really where their agenda lies, because that's where A, they're the most effective, and B, that's where a lot of special interest groups will go to them, right? Or a lot of advocacy groups will go to them because they have power on the committees that they sit on. So a lot of these Republicans, like majority of them, I think, except two, do not sit on the House Armed Forces Committee, and there's like 200 Republicans in the House who have not signed on. So here's the thing. Let's say your rep sits on the Agriculture Committee. You're putting your whole MST story. He or she says they support veterans, but in reality, they're not educated at all in anything of this. And they think, they don't even know MST exists, right? Or like it's not as big of a problem as they think. What's going to happen is when you're telling your story, they're going to see you as another isolated incident, or they might be like, it's you and Vanessa Guillen, and what'll happen sometimes is they'll just ignore it and not respond or get back to you, especially if they don't feel that there's a benefit to them or a sense of urgency. So then what happens is you're going up an uphill battle, and sometimes you're like fighting, and now you have to get like your family involved and your friends involved, and now you all have to pressure the elected official. So what I would suggest is see where the conversation goes before sending them all of these articles, because your veterans advocate is the gatekeeper to your elected official, and they know where your elected officials' loyalties lie and where their interest lies. So when you're having the conversation, come up with an elevator pitch that's going to capture interest, that's going to connect you to the cause that's happening, and a way to connect to your veterans advocate and your elected official. At that point, when they tell you, they might say a couple things. I'm not too familiar with this. Our office doesn't really know a lot about it, and they might want to know facts. that's when you send them the fact sheet, right? Because if that's what they're looking for, that's fine. Something else you could do is like, they might tell you, hey, we want to hear your story. Send them the link. You know what I mean? Like, you have to gauge your actions along with what they're interested in and how they're interested in helping. So the best way I can explain that is like, think of dating, right? If you go on a date and one person wants a long-term relationship and the other person just wants to have sex, are you two really compatible? No. Are you going to get anywhere? No. Are either one of you going to get what you want? No. So what happens when you're doing this is you have an interest, you know where you lie, but the question mark is, what side of the fence does your elected official lie on? We don't know. So the thing about that is you have to keep in mind that you have to find that out, right? Because these 200 Republicans, we don't know what their interest is, you know? So the thing about it is, it's impossible for all of us to know. And for many of you, this is the first time you're going to be engaging with your elected official. So one of the key things that, you really want to just keep that in mind until you learn where their office's mindset's at and where engage where they're at, if that makes sense. Like, what I'm just trying to say is like, don't go in like, here's my story. Like, I'll give you a perfect example of what happens to me all the time. So people will go to our website, right? And then all of a sudden, our support inbox will have like emails that are super long. And I'm talking about like, people send books to us and about, or even DMs to the page. And they'll be like, I'm an MST survivor, and they'll tell their whole story start to finish. And even when we tell stories in perspectives or whenever we do things, we have a certain outline we use because we know that like no one's going to spend 40 minutes reading an article, right? So we create, the way we design the platform is to make it quick, efficient, and educational and entertaining within a certain amount of time. So, you have to think like, especially if you did share your story and it's like a book, that is, no one's going to get anywhere with it. And like I said, I'm not trying to be harsh. I want to be honest. So you learn the skills to be effective, because what will happen a lot of times is groups will be like, oh, call your rep, demand this. And then you don't get anywhere because there are steps you have to take. So I want to just bring certain things into your awareness. So when you guys are doing this advocacy work, we're successful in getting this bill passed. That's why I'm having this conversation, because I want you to be successful. So, those are just things to be mindful of, but age it. And as the relationship is deepening, maybe your rep says like, hey, you sent me some really good information. I was able to read it. I'm interested in talking to you. What date and time are you available? Let's have a conversation. That is your open door to be like, yeah, let's schedule a Zoom, a Google Meet, a Skype, whatever. And when they give you those 30 minutes, you got to still keep another couple things in mind. If you have 30 minutes, you can introduce yourself, and you can have a conversation with them. And you can do what you need to take care of. But anyway, so you could take care of those things, and then whatever you're doing with your elected official, maybe the next time they give you an hour meeting. And then from an hour, like, you'll tell your story more. So just know that there's a place and a time for you to open up, that you can engage. Just, don't spill your guts on call number one when you're asking for an email, because then you're not getting anywhere. I haven't told my stories over 35 years, and I haven't been able to discuss it. So Shannon, one of the things that I would definitely tell you is telling your story can be very difficult. It can bring up a lot of triggering emotions, which is all okay. That it's normal that happens during advocacy. I've had full-blown panic attacks before. Like when I did the Women's March, till this day, I have no idea how that speech came out that good, because I was having like such severe anxiety. So things like that will definitely happen, and it's okay. just make sure you're in therapy, that you're seeking treatment, because that's important. And those are just things that you need to be able to navigate, and make sure you're in a healthy space, because like if you're having nightmares, if you're not doing well, if you're going through relapses and flashbacks, then it could be harmful. If you're ready to come forward and this is something you've navigated internally for yourself and you want to do advocacy work and you feel like you need some support, you can reach out to us and you can partner with a volunteer and they will help you with the process. So if you are struggling, because that does happen to survivors. All right, awesome, Ashley. You are disrespecting Vanessa and her family. You have no right to use for your so that's definitely not true in any capacity, right? MSTM is a non-for-profit, and I'm assuming that you came here from another page just to dissent, and I'm gonna call you out on it. Number one, a lot of MIRA is in the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act, a lot of it. And that happened because we presented over the summer our lobbying kits to Congress. And if you've been following our page, you would have known that. And secondly, on top of a lot of MIRAs going in there, MIRA is also going to be going into the SHARP program. So a lot of the advocacy work that we're doing at MSTM is getting pushed forward in that bill. And we are endorsers on the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act. So, and the Guillen family approved the I Am Vanessa Guillen bill, and our policies from MIRA got merged into that. So for you to say that, it's not only unequivocally false, but the statement you're making in and of itself is disrespectful. So for the fact that you feel the need to come here to our page when you have no idea what's going on in our community to make such a statement, that's disrespectful. On top of that, we're all here to advance the conversation, and we're all here to get this passed. So until I see you doing work, you're gonna get off the page. And I'm gonna make that clear. Like, I'm not here to deal with nonsense. And for people that are here to cause problems, like, we're not engaging in that. So you're going to get you're going to what do you call it? Get called out for it, right? Anyway, back to where we're going with this. The training deck, you guys have it available. Feel free to share it. And for anyone else, if you guys need assistance, just DM us with the call bank so we can help move this legislation forward. So if you guys have any other questions, just let us know. Other than that, have a good day. Take care. Bye-bye.